Have you ever found yourself thinking about work? I mean, it takes up so much of our lives, right? Wishing it could be more engaging, maybe even enjoyable. We all want to feel good about what we do, I
Right.
think. But is work really meant to be fun?
That's a big question.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into something that sounds, well, maybe a bit like a corporate slogan at first glance. But the sources we've looked at, a really interesting corporate philosophy document and a discussion with a renowned cognitive psychologist, they suggest it's much more profound. We're talking about joy and fun and how it's seen less as a catchphrase and more as a framework for, well, personal growth, company success, and ultimately how you thrive as an individual. So our mission here is to pull out the key insights. What does joy and fun really mean in a professional setting? How does it drive growth, both for you and the organization? And yeah, how does it connect to what we think of as success? Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Joy and fun. As a company motto, it sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? A little bit, maybe?
It can seem that way initially.
But our sources suggest it means something much deeper.
Yeah.
How does a company actually weave that kind of philosophy into its, core?
Yeah, that's what's really fascinating, how a concept like joy and fun gets built right into the foundational ethics, aiming for that long-term sustainability. So HORIBA, the company mentioned, uses this as their actual core motto, and it's based on this belief. If you find real interest and, importantly, pride in your work, which, let's face it, fills a huge chunk of life,
Yeah.
then you get satisfaction, you get great results. And overall, you just have a more enjoyable life. It's not just words on a wall, it's their strategic approach.
Strategy, not just sentiment.
Exactly. And it's not casual. It's tied directly into their ethical code, something that applies globally. The company really believes that living this principle helps ensure their own sustainable growth. So it creates this link, this powerful connection between how an individual feels and performs and the company's long-term health. It's like a mutual investment.
That makes sense. Connecting individual well-being to the organization's future. But okay, if joy and fun is so fundamental for them, the cognitive psychologist we looked at has a pretty surprising take on what fun actually means in the context of work. It kind of challenges the usual idea.
Oh, absolutely. The psychologist gives us maybe a more stark view of how our brains actually experience work. Inherently, the brain doesn't register work as fun or enjoyable in the same way it does, say, leisure or eating something delicious. If you were to look at fMRI scans while someone's actually doing work tasks, you wouldn't see those pleasure centers lighting up just from the effort itself.
Really, no pleasure signals at all.
Not from the act of working, inherently. The psychologist even made this quite provocative observation, something like, if an office worker genuinely finds their routine tasks fun, you might wonder about their mental state. And if a student thinks studying itself is fun, they might be considered a bit crazy.
Wow, okay. That's pretty blunt.
It is, but the point isn't just to be cynical, it's to highlight that we generally do work for its meaning, or the sense of accomplishment it gives us, or the rewards, It's not usually about some pure, innate pleasure found in the task itself.
Okay, so if work isn't fun in that simple pleasure-seeking way then,
Yeah.
where does that feeling come from? That initial joy and fun vibe we sometimes get, especially when starting something new, a new job, a new project. We've all felt that buzz, right?
We have. And according to the cognitive psychologist, the real source of that positive perception, that feeling we label joy and fun, is actually what they call growth. Changjangam, that initial enjoyment, especially noticeable early in a career or when you're tackling a completely new challenge, it isn't because the work itself is easy or instantly gratifying. It's a positive effect. It stems from that deep, powerful sense of learning, improving, becoming more competent.
So it's the feeling of getting better.
Exactly. Think about leveling up in a video game. It can be really hard work, right? Grinding, figuring things out. But humans are basically wired to interpret that process of growing or improving as enjoyable. When you're constantly picking up new skills, solving problems, seeing your abilities expand, your brain reads that as satisfaction, as engagement. That feeling of progress is the real engine behind the joy in this context.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. So the joy and fun isn't about the task being easy, but about the process of getting better at it, learning, mastering new things, which implies if that sense of growth stops, the joy probably stops too.
Precisely.
So what happens that our sources mentioned this is a critical point, especially for more experienced people.
Yeah, it's a really common slump, and it's often described as bore out. It's important to distinguish this from burnout.
Okay, bore out versus burnout, what's the difference?
Well, burnout, as most people understand it, is exhaustion from just too much work, too much pressure, feeling overwhelmed. Bore out, though, It comes from the brain adapting too well to tasks that become repetitive. There's a lack of novelty, a lack of challenge, and this leads to a feeling of depletion, but it comes from stagnation, from not growing.
Stagnation, that sounds draining in its own way.
It really is. And the consequences can be pretty negative. It often leads to pessimism, about yourself, about the organization. You might start feeling like you're being left behind, watching others grow while you're just stuck in the same place. The cognitive psychologist actually pointed out a couple of what they called foolish acts that contribute to this.
Foolish acts, like what?
One is dedicating yourself completely to the job tasks, but without doing anything for your own personal development or self-care, sort of neglecting your own growth outside the immediate role.
Yeah.
And the other is the opposite extreme, just doing the absolute bare minimum, no extra effort, no trying to improve skills, just coasting, allowing yourself to stagnate professionally.
Right, both extremes seem problematic.
Yeah. And from this perspective, an expert, someone who's really good at their job, can reach a point where they no longer feel that joy. They might not even get external praise anymore because, well, everyone expects them to be good. That crucial sense of growth has just flattened out. They're competent, yes, but the spark, the engagement, has faded.
That's a really interesting definition of an expert plateau. So, okay, if stagnation, this bore out, is such a danger, how do we fight it? How do we keep that growth feeling alive?
The key seems to be what our sources frame as a win-win approach. The idea is that the professional thrives and the workplace thrives along with them. But crucially, this requires intentional action. It doesn't just happen.
Intentional action from the individual.
Yes. The psychologist suggests actively initiating small changes or expansions in your responsibilities or roles. And here's a slight paradoxical bit. People often resist these minor job adjustments more strongly than big, major changes, like a complete role shift.
Huh. Why is
It's not fully clear, maybe comfort zones. But the point is, these small shifts, these little stretches, are vital for continuous growth. So the advice is, be proactive. Seek out these opportunities. Maybe even, negotiate for them. Frame it like, okay, I'll take on this extra task X, but can I also get involved in project Y to develop this other skill? It becomes a mutual benefit.
like trading tasks for growth opportunities?
Exactly. And this kind of proactive engagement is what helps someone move beyond just being an expert to becoming what the source calls a master.
Expert to master. What's the distinction there?
An expert does their job well, maybe even perfectly, but a master, they go beyond just competency. They become essentially indispensable. They often take on the work next to the work, mentoring, training the next generation, sharing deep knowledge. These are often the people who stay with an organization for a long time, maybe decades, because they've continuously evolved. They're incredibly hard to replace because they hold so much institutional knowledge and skill.
So for you, the listener, it sounds like taking ownership of your development, pushing for those small changes even, is really the key to long-term satisfaction and, well, becoming that master. And this isn't just about the job itself, is it? It connects to bigger ideas.
Absolutely. It ties into this broader concept of economic freedom, which is often misunderstood, right? People sometimes think it means having enough money so you don't have to work.
Yeah, the quit your job dream.
Right. But our sources define it differently. It's more about the freedom to transition towards work you genuinely find more meaningful or enjoyable while still maintaining your income. It's about having agency and choice in your professional path.
Having choices, not just stopping. That's a different angle.
It is, and there's an important caution that comes with this too. Even if you find work you absolutely love, doing only that relentlessly for, say, 40 or 50 years, that can actually become a source of real pain.
How so? Doing what you love becomes painful.
Think about it like this. Even the most comfortable physical position becomes torture if you hold it for hours without moving. Similarly, constant engagement in even a beloved activity without variation or balance can lead to a different kind of suffering or burnout over decades.
Balance is key, even in passion.
Precisely. So a truly rich person, in this broader sense, isn't just defined by wealth. It's someone who has the ability, the freedom to move towards work they prefer, work that provides that sense of growth and meaning, while also earning a substantial income.
Okay, so linking this all together, this journey isn't just about climbing a career ladder or making more money. It's about a more holistic view of well-being, right?
Yeah.
Finding a sustainable path.
Exactly. A path that sustains you personally and professionally over the very long term.
Which leads to another fascinating area our sources touched on, personality. Are there specific traits that might make someone more likely to achieve this kind of long-term success and well-being? It's not just what you do, maybe it's also about who you are.
That's a great question. And yes, the sources looked into the big five personality traits. So things like conscientiousness, neuroticism, and whether you're more extroverted or introverted, those are seen as relatively stable parts of personality, harder to change significantly.
Right.
But two others, agreeableness, which is
Yeah.
basically how well you get along with others,
Yeah.
and openness, your receptiveness to new experiences and information, these offer more room for development. You can consciously work on these.
Okay, agreeableness and openness. So what did the sources find? What traits are common in these highly successful, thriving individuals?
Two things stood out: moderate agreeableness and high openness.
Moderate agreeableness,
Yeah.
not high.
Right, moderate. This means you're not antisocial or a lone wolf. You can collaborate and maintain necessary relationships. But you're also not a complete people pleaser. You don't avoid conflict at all costs or try to make everyone happy, which can be paralyzing. You navigate relationships effectively without making needless enemies.
Okay, and high openness.
High openness means you actively embrace new information, new ideas, new ways of doing things. You're not resistant to change or learning. You're curious. This combination seems powerful. You can work well with others when needed, moderate agreeableness, and you're constantly learning and adapting, high openness.
That makes sense. How do you cultivate that balance, especially the agreeableness part?
Well, the psychologist cited Nietzsche actually with some really practical advice. The advice is cultivate the habit of promising actions, not emotions, when interacting with people.
Actions, not emotions. Why is that so important?
Because emotions are fickle, they change constantly. If you promise based on how you feel, I promise I'll always support you because I feel loyal right now, you're setting yourself up for potential betrayal when feelings shift. And hurt feelings, broken emotional promises are really hard to repair. But actions are different. If you promise an action, I will deliver this report by Friday, and you fail, you can analyze why. You can apologize, correct the action, make amends, and recommit to a future action. It's concrete, manageable, and builds trust based on reliability, not fleeting feelings.
Focus on what you do, not just how you feel about doing it.
Exactly. And you see this reflected in some company cultures.
Yeah.
The sources mention Songpa's 11 ways to work well, rules phrased as specific actions. Things like 9.01 is not 9.01. That's an action. Or the person who sees trash first picks it up, another clear action.
Very concrete.
Yeah. And then there's the example of Elon Musk and Tesla, often seen as a culture with, let's say, lower agreeableness, but extremely high performance. Their anti-handbook reportedly emphasizes results and action above all else. Things like disregard reporting lines if necessary to get the job done faster. It prioritizes effective action over sticking to potentially inefficient social protocols or just being nice.
That's definitely a different approach. So success isn't always about being the most liked person in the room. It's about being effective, reliable, and open to growth.
That seems to be the core message, yes. It's about actionable commitment and adaptability.
Okay, this leads us to one final, really thought-provoking idea from the sources. It's about capacity, often talked about metaphorically as the size of your vessel.
Yes, that metaphor. We hear it a lot, right? That person has a big vessel, usually meaning they have great capacity or ambition. A small vessel is sometimes seen as a limitation.
Exactly. But the source, the psychologist, actually challenges the idea that a bigger vessel is always better.
Right. The argument made is pretty interesting. It suggests that having people with small vessels, meaning maybe more limited capacity or ambition in certain areas, is actually crucial for social harmony.
How so? Smaller capacity is good for society.
Well, think about it. If everyone had a massive vessel, constantly striving for maximum influence, maximum achievement, always pushing, it could lead to nonstop conflict and competition. Society might become incredibly stressful and unstable. People with more focused or limited ambitions, who find satisfaction within certain bounds, actually help create pockets of peace and stability.
That's a really different way to think about capacity and ambition.
It is. And the real takeaway isn't about judging vessel size, big or small. It's about self-knowledge. The critical thing is to understand your own capacity, your own vessel size, and then define your own vision of wealth or success that actually fits you, that feels right for your capacity.
Instead of just chasing someone else's definition of big.
Exactly. The source warns that constantly trying to achieve more than your vessel can comfortably hold, well, you end up spending more energy just managing the overflow, dealing with the stress and chaos, than you do actually filling your vessel with things that are truly meaningful and sustainable for you.
Wow. That really makes you think.
Uh,
Are we always just pushing for more? Or do we stop to figure out what actually fulfills us and fits our real unique capacity?
It's a fundamental question for well-being, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Okay, that feels like a good place to pause and recap. This has been fascinating. We've explored how joy and fun at work isn't really about easy pleasure, but about that vital sense of growth. We talked about the danger of bore-out when growth stalls, especially for experienced pros, and how small, proactive changes are key to fighting it. We touched on the power of focusing on actions over emotions in our interactions, building reliability, and just now, this really insightful idea about understanding your own capacity, your vessel, and defining success on your own terms. So, considering all of this, thinking about joy and fun as growth, what does sustained growth actually look like for you right now in your situation? And maybe more importantly, what's one small action you could commit to today or this week that starts moving you in that direction? Something to really ponder. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.